Coming up, I do a deal with Liara, and I get confused by dripstone. But then, I create the greatest Mooshroom farm in the world. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Truly Bedrock Season 3. Today we're going to be working on a passive mob farm, but before we get to that, let's look at all the things I've been up to since the last video. And we start with a little resource gathering. As mentioned in the last video, I now have a lot of farms bringing in a lot of items, and it was time to gather some of those items, which meant having to be AFK at several of them. First I was AFK at the Guardian farm, then at the fish farm, and then at the witch farm. And once all of that grueling, extremely hard work was over, it was time to collect my rewards. Starting over at the witch farm, I grabbed almost a shulker of gunpowder before heading to the Guardian farm to craft some sea lanterns. Once I'd crafted a shulker's worth, it was time to fly over to the fish farm, empty out all of the unwanted fish so I could collect all of the good things, like the ink sacs, bones, and tridents. However, there were too many good things, and as a result they didn't all fit in my shulker boxes. So I compacted the loot by turning the bones into bone meal, and then into bone blocks, so it'd all fit. I even gathered a shulker of bamboo from the farm I made in the last video before setting down to craft 2 shulker boxes of rockets, one for the shop and one for personal use. I also crafted some dark prismarine from the spare prismarine shards and ink sacs I had laying around at home. First I restocked the rocket shop, and then I went back to my copper shop, which had a surprising amount of uncollected profit. Squirreling away the profits quickly, I then went to replacing all of the items that were missing, including tridents, nautilus shells, andesite, ink sacs, and bone blocks, which should have been bones, but I'd compacted them all earlier. Once I'd finished restocking all of the items that I could, I was feeling quite rich. However, I decided I wanted to feel even more rich, so I went and fortuned all of the ore blocks that I'd been silk touching recently. I pillared up and mined down with Fortune 3, giving me even more many shiny things. Some of those shiny things, however, needed to be smelted in my single furnace setup, which was still processing 2 shulkers of sand, so those might take a while. In order to waste some time at home so all of that sand and ore could process, I decided to organise my ender chest better, combining and crafting shulkers into more useful arrangement, as well as crafting many mossy cobble things. And those mossy cobble things were immediately put to good use at the bottom of the lake around the portal tower. With a mix of andesite cobble and mossy cobble variants, I started trying to make the bed of the lake look more natural and rough. I spent a lot of time accidentally going into swim mode and misplacing blocks due to working underwater in Minecraft Bedrock Edition, which is an absolute nightmare. But what made it worthwhile was knowing that my lonely furnace was just below, powering through all of that sand while I was making many mistakes. Something else that came powering through whilst working underwater was Liara, who suddenly appeared demanding many glass in return for sand, as well as a few stacks of copper blocks.
Bottom's looking fancy here.
Get in there. Well, I say get in there. I'm not getting there. It's taken forever, and I've hardly done anything. So.
Well, this is a lot of work from the looks of it. Jeez.
Yeah. Maybe I shouldn't have attempted to do the whole lake. Maybe.
Well, if you need tough for it, I have more tough than I know.
Oh, tough. I never even thought about tough. Tough would go really nicely in there. Yes. I've got a bit of tough.
Give me literally 45 seconds, and I will have it.
45 seconds later, a shulker box of tough arrived. Wow, that's going to go I never even thought about tough. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I was looking at what you're doing on the bottom here. I was like, hey, that's something tough would actually be useful for.
Yeah, it would go well. Ah, genius. Well, I have a shulker box with glass here for you. There you go.
Okay.
I will trade it for sands and coppers.
Of course, yes. Here is one
many.
for you. And
Nice.
I believe you said you'd be down with me, like, paying in advance for more for later.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't let me forget, though, because I will.
Hopefully neither one of us will, because I'm going to be putting this in a video, so...
Jeez. Okay, wow. Okay, so we got three stacks of sand there. 3 shulkers of sand and 3 stacks of copper. Wow, okay. Right, well, I better go and get all of that smelted so I don't forget. Now put it to the side, ready for when you want to collect it.
Yeah, no, this is going to be most helpful.
Amazing. Well, pleasure doing business with you. Yeah, come again. So with Liara gone, 4 more stacks of copper blocks in my pocket and a free shulker of tough blocks at my disposal, I decided I'd had enough of working underwater and proceeded to work in a place where I could place blocks where I intended to and didn't keep getting put into swim mode. That place just happened to be at my base, which is also conveniently close to my lonely furnace, allowing it to chew through even more sand while I placed even more blocks. Using my current favourite block palette of polished andesite and deep slate variants, I began putting in floors and walls around the area directly below my storage system, taking care to work around the farms and try and keep everything looking light and clean. I spent almost 3 hours making everything feel just a little bit better. Which leads us right back to now, standing here on this Mooshroom Island. But not a Mooshroom Island on the TV server. I'm actually on a creative copy of the world, designing a brand new mushroom farm to get many leathers and beefs.
You lose.
So if we're going to do this, then we need to do it properly, which means answering a lot of questions that I have about how mushrooms spawn and their general behavior. And the first thing I want to work out is how high the mushrooms will spawn. Will they spawn up here at y equals 200? The answer is yes, they will, which is great, because that means there's no need for a perimeter. The next question I had was, does the looting enchantment make any difference if we're to kill the mushrooms with the Trident Killer? And again, the answer was yes, it does. It makes a big difference. The next thing on my mind was finding a replacement for buttons. The mushrooms will no longer pathfind over gaps if you put buttons down the side, so I needed something that didn't take up any physical space like a trapdoor, but would still encourage the mushrooms to fall down the gaps between and onto the magma blocks below. And I found that dead coral fans worked absolutely perfectly. And then I wanted to find out if mushrooms would spawn with glass in their heads, in the hope that we could glass push them down the gaps in order to speed up rates. And the answer was yes, they will spawn with glass in their heads, but then they just get stuck, which isn't ideal. Then I was playing around with some more crazy ideas, like potentially pushing them into bubble columns, like in my witch farm. However, then I discovered a problem with bubble columns, so I became distracted. So as you can see here, I have made a bubble column using glass, soul sand and water sources made from a bucket. These are not flowing water, they're all water sources, which should mean if I go in there, I should start floating upwards, but I won't. And if I go into survival, I'm going to start drowning. And I've got the same thing going on here with a magma block style water elevator. I am in survival and you can see I can swim. In this, it's not flowing water, it is normal water. And I can swim in it perfectly fine, which is a bit weird. Now I've got working bubble columns on Truly Bedrock, so I don't think they are inherently broken, but what I think might be happening is the water from the bucket in creative is not actually creating water source blocks. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove that soul soil there. I'm going to use some kelp in order to force those into being solid blocks. I'm then going to remove that and put that there. And there you go, you can see that is now a bubble column. So for whatever reason, a water bucket no longer creates water source blocks, which is weird. Weird bubble columns aside, it was time to get back to testing. So I created an entire testing facility to test my many ideas. You see, this is the standard design that Slack used last season. It's very simple. The mushrooms, as we've seen before, will spawn on there. They'll fall down the holes. And hopefully, if I've done things right, go down the hole. Jeez, you're so stubborn. So this is why I want to try different designs. It's very difficult to get them to go down the hole. There we go. They will splat on the ground below and their items will get collected by a rail system, or in our case, a cheaty command block which sucks all of their items into this hopper here and puts them in there. But is that the best design? I have here a few buttons. If we click this one, you'll see that the system moves about a bit. And now instead of having a 1 wide gap between each one, we have a 2 wide gap within each one, which means the mushroom should find it a lot easier to fall off. However, there is now 50% less spawning spaces, so rates will be slower because of that, but I want to know how much slower. The third button I have will go for the waffle design that I've used previously on passive mob farms, which works great, but again, Because there is a lot of ground for the mushrooms to walk over, they tend to meander between the holes rather than falling straight through them. So it can be a little bit slow this way, although there is a lot more spawning spaces, so they should spawn more frequently. And finally, for the top section, if we go to that, we've got the original meat waffle design that I created, which has got 3 wide holes, which should mean they're falling down more regularly, but again has a lot less spawning spaces, which means that rates will be slower. And there are 2 more buttons at my amazing test facility that change out the kill method. The first one being the magma blocks that we've already seen, and the second one being a water stream system that flush the mushrooms into a trident killer, and while we're holding a looting 3 sword, we should get a lot more drops that way. Finally, I have a very fancy timing system that will enable mob spawning and then disable it again once an entire shulker box worth of items has passed from one shulker box to another. Using a comparator system to detect how many items are in the shulker boxes, this system will turn off mob spawning, preventing any more mushrooms from spawning as soon as the timer ends. Which basically means rather than having to sit there for the full 11¼ minutes while this thing runs, I can actually speed up the entire process using a program called Cheat Engine and do it in less than a minute. Which is extremely handy when I'm planning on doing so many tests. 4 completely different spawning platforms and 2 completely different killing methods, and I want to test each combination at least 3 or 4 times to make sure I'm getting a good average of rates and there aren't any anomalies throwing the results. So with all that to do, I should really get cracking. There we go, that's another test done. The timer has run out. Let's check out what we got. Ooh, interesting. Slightly more, again, than the test before. So many more spawning spaces plus big holes equals a good return. So far, each test we've done has been slightly better than the last. So after a short period of time, farms 1, 2, and 3 were doing pretty well. However, farm 4 was not good. It was not good at all. So I ignored number 4 and went back to testing numbers 1, 2, and 3 a few more times each. And you can see that the third one, which is the one we've got at the moment, is the best, but only just. The first one gets on average 174 beef and 89 leather. The second one gets on average 179 beef and 90 leather. And the third one gets 184 beef and 91 leather. So there really isn't much difference. What you might notice though is that the second one went from having quite a lot to having a substantial amount less to then having absolutely loads. And the third one again had loads and then loads and then quite a lot less, which really brought the average down. So it really does matter on the cows' pathfinding whether or not they choose to fall down the holes or not. It seems to hold everything up. However, pathfinding aside, what we're going to be doing now is switching from having our magma floor to having our trident floor. And the first thing we've got to do is get rid of this chest and that hopper, so everything goes in that hopper over there, and fix the trident killer, because when you bring it in from a structure block, the redstone goes all kind of strange. So there we go, that's that fixed, and now all I got to do is actually throw a trident in there. Which means it's now time for more testing, but to make life a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to just completely ignore designs 1 and 2 and focus on design 3, and I'm not even going to bother testing the magma block design again because I've already done those tests. All I need to do is design 3 with the trident killer. And after running that test 4 times, I can tell you that this thing is by far superior than having the magma block system. And the average was 252 beef and 140 leather, which is 64 more beef than we got with the original system and 49 more leather than we got with the original system. So the trident killer is 100% the best way to go forward. However, all of the tests I've done today have been on a 1 chunk size farm, which is very small and much smaller than I'm planning on building on Truly Bedrock. Which means the water streams that feed the trident killer are very short and the mushrooms don't stay in it for a very long time, which means the rates are relatively fast. Making this farm bigger might have a detrimental effect because the mushrooms won't be dying as quickly. But we won't find that out until we built it on Truly Bedrock. And back on the Truly Bedrock server, I have everything I need to build it except for one thing. I don't have any coral fans or oceany stuff, but fortunately, just happen to be right next to a nice warm ocean biome where I can go and get them. Amazing, this is good news. However, the bad news is I'm going to need many of them, so this could take a very long time. Oh, jeez. And it's the fans I need rather than those. Those ones. So, in order to make my life a little bit easier, I put down a conduit so that I could breathe underwater and mine a bit more quickly, and then I spent my entire life getting fans from the bottom of the ocean. And then after spending a little bit of time stealing some of Bruno's mycelium, it was time to get to work. I started by scaffolding up to y equals 150 and making a small basic platform to put my ender chest and a few boxes down. I then started working on a trident killer, and of course I used the trident killer design that relies on repeaters instead of observers because I've had problems with observers already this season. Then it was time to start making an absolutely huge glass platform, which I made massive and then extended even further to make it even bigger. Once the glass was in place, I put round a border to keep the water from flowing off the edges of it, and then put sea lanterns around to keep it nice and light. I then went round with a bucket, putting in all of the water sources for the water streams, and then it was finally time to start placing the mycelium. I went up a few blocks, placed in the grid pattern, and then proceeded to place in many coral fans, of which I ran out right near the end and had to go back to the ocean to grab a few more before I could finish it off. Once it was done, I realised that the AFK spot that I was planning at y equals 150 was a couple of blocks too high and may have resulted in a few less spawns, so being on the cautious side, I moved it down a few blocks, checked it again, and everything was then done. So there we go, with beef now pouring into the system, we are 99% of the way there. You can see there are cows falling down through this thing. Now, we're in a mushroom biome, or a Mooshroom biome, so we really shouldn't have to worry about hostile mob spawning. But again, this is Bedrock Edition, and I don't trust it, so we've got a safe, secure box there. And there is a handy door up here where we can actually throw the trident in and out of the trident killer and get in if we need to. Going up this scaffolding brings us out into the water streams, and above that you have the mycelium platforms with many coral fans on the outside, and mushrooms falling in, which is great. But the main problem with this farm is that it will only run during the day, because mushrooms won't spawn at night, or at least they won't spawn in low light levels. So what I'm going to do is literally just go round with my torches on all of the corners. I'm just going to put down a torch. And just to prove that this isn't going to affect things, you can see those mushrooms have just spawned over there right next to those torches I've already placed, so that's good news. And with all of those now in place, there really is only one more thing this farm needs. And that is an automatic sorting system that will send the beef through furnaces. However, I'm not going to worry about that right now because I'm very happy with the progress I've made today, and I think I've probably just about done enough. One thing I may not have already mentioned that I should mention is this is actually bigger than a chunk. It's bigger than the one that we made in the test world, which means it should be capable of producing a lot more beef and leather. Fingers crossed, at least that's the case. And there's only one way to find out, and that is to do an AFK session. Now, I can't use Cheat Engine on the Truly Bedrock Survival server. It won't work, and it would be cheating. So I guess I'm going to have to just go AFK the old-fashioned way. Now, I will admit I know this is probably not the most exciting time-lapse in the world, but I wanted to take a moment just to ask you guys how you're enjoying this season so far. If you've been around my channel for a while, you'll know that this editing style and this way I'm producing videos at the moment is completely different from how I used to and would normally do so. But I'm really enjoying doing it, and I would really like your feedback. Do you like it? Does it feel better? Does it feel any different to you? Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, back to the video. I actually stayed AFK for 22.5 minutes, which is exactly double the length we were AFK on the test world. So I expected to get roughly double the amount. However, I was very pleasantly surprised to find we had not only doubled, but we had got many more beef and leather than we got in the test world. So considering we didn't get even nearly half of that during our rate tests earlier, it really does go to show you that size does matter. Now, we do have a bigger area on here than we did on the test world, so it's expected to get a bit more, but I didn't expect that much more. That's ridiculous, although I did notice during the time-lapse that there was one coral fan missing from the top. I also noticed that it does absolutely work during the night as well because of the torches we put at the top, which is good news. So this is working Well, I was going to say 24 hours a day, but then, yeah, it doesn't work like that in Minecraft. But you know what I mean. It works all day and all night long. So, having squeezed the entire contents of the farm into a shulker box, it was time to go home and feed it to the lonely furnace. Hello, furnace. I have brought you many, many, many tasty beefs. Why don't you go and put it in your fancy new spinny roundy furnace? No, this one needs it. This one needs it more because it gives me many, many XPs. Yes. Oh, look at it go. Filling up the chest. This is good news. What's not good news, however, is this dripstone, which has been here for a couple of weeks. It's actually been here since I made this moss farm generator thing. I put it up there in a live stream, and it has never, ever grown. Now, considering yesterday, while I was doing all of my off-camera work that you saw at the beginning of this video, I was working down here for more than 6 hours, I would have expected at least one of these to have started growing by now. So, I need to do some more testing. And just like that, I am now in another creative copy of the world, and the first thing I'm going to do is increase the random tick speed. I'm going to put it on 3000, and I'm going to hope that this makes some sort of difference. Which it doesn't seem to. At all. So what am I doing wrong? See, I was under the impression that if you had a dripstone block with a piece of pointed dripstone underneath it, and a water source or at least flowing water on top, then it would eventually grow. I was also under the impression that this was tied to the random tick speed of the game. And as you can see, this is now actually working, but it's generating from below and above, which I find bizarre. So perhaps it's to do with the block that's on the floor rather than the block that's on the top. See, before I put the floor in this morning, it was always just stone that was on the floor. So, and you can see immediately it's already growing on the stone there. So that works. But now the floor is all slabbed with light underneath it. So let's see if that works. Will it grow on a slab? Yes, it will. So that's not the issue either. So what's going on differently here to what I've got going on downstairs? Looking above it, you can see we've got plenty of water, and looking below it, well, it's the same thing. Maybe my slabs are too low down. Maybe it needs to be a bit higher up. Let's put some andesite just there. See if that makes a difference. Which it doesn't. Well, okay. Let's take these away. They're clearly all broken. And let's find out exactly which block the water source is on, which is that one. So I'm going to put that next to it so we can spot it from underneath. And I'm going to put that back there and see if that makes a difference. It does. That's now working, albeit very, very slowly. And there we go, the next stage. And eventually it joins together. So, is it because the floor is too high, or is it because they were all grouped together? See, I was told if they're grouped together, they grow faster. Which is clearly not the case, as none of those are growing. Okay, let's get rid of all of those again, except the one that we want. And let's get rid of this temporary floor. Let's see if it will grow onto that floor there. Is it that no, my floor isn't too far away. So it just doesn't want them next to each other. What about one block away? That one still grew, even with the other ones one block away, and it's grown again with those one block away. The other ones are not growing, though, at all. So maybe they all need water sources. Now, we've already learnt from creative mode today that using a water bucket doesn't actually create as a proper water source because it won't generate bubble columns. So maybe that's the issue on our creative test world here. But obviously in survival, we'll do this properly. But now we've got full water sources there, and immediately you can see things are growing. Wow. Okay. So they all need to be water sources, but now we've got it like that. Can we group them all together again? And the answer is yes, we can. Yes, we can indeed. So it was literally just a case of not having water sources everywhere. Well, now we know. This is good news. So back on Truly Bedrock, all I need to do is grab myself a couple of buckets and a little bit of scaffolding, and then make our way upstairs. Now, we're going to have many, many dripstones. And there we go. That is now fully water sourced. This is good news. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove all of these again, like so. This time I'm going to place them one block apart from each other, and hopefully that will improve the growing speed. Fingers crossed. In fact, we're going to do a test. We're going to have those ones at the back all together. Let's see what happens after the next million years that I've been working down here. And on that note, it is unfortunately time to end. I hope you've all enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please do leave a like. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing. And hopefully, I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.